Who doesn't love cheese? You can add it to any dish, and it gets instantly better. But while we can all agree that cheese is awesome, even the biggest cheese lovers still don't know about how it's made. So, in today's video, let's put together a spread of your favorites and see what goes on inside factories. All cheese begins with one key ingredient: milk. But not all milk is the same. Most cheeses you know, like cheddar, Swiss, and Gouda, are made from cow's milk. No surprise, since it has the perfect balance of fat and protein. Sheep's milk is good too. Even though it's too rich in lactose to drink, it forms the base for Roquefort and Manchego cheeses. For a tangy twist, goat's milk produces sharp chèvre and creamy boucheron. But here's what people don't know. Turning milk into cheese requires more than just the milk itself. It needs a coagulant to form curds. Rennet comes in. While it's an enzyme found in young mammals naturally, it's now mostly made through microbial bioprocessing. But milk and rennet are just the start. Flavors come in from added salt, spices, and even wine. Making cheese requires science, skill, and a bit of patience. The people behind it are known as fromagers, or cheesemakers. And despite how much variety there is, the early steps in the process are surprisingly similar across the board. Since milk is the foundation of every cheese, it's important to start with the perfect batch. But what does perfect mean? That honestly depends on the type of cheese you want to make. Cheesemakers start by adjusting the milk to ensure the right balance of protein and fat. The milk is then usually pasteurized or treated with mild heat. This not only kills off unwanted organisms that could spoil the cheese, but also gets the milk in the right condition for the starter cultures to thrive. Once the milk is pasteurized, it's cooled to around 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Next comes a critical step in the cheese-making process: acidification. Left on its own, milk will eventually turn sour due to bacterial growth. But this natural process is unpredictable, and the end flavor isn't always pleasant. To control this, cheesemakers add starter cultures to the milk. These cultures are carefully selected strains of bacteria that help acidify the milk in a predictable way. At this stage, the milk should already be at 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and it stays at this temperature for about 30 minutes while it ripens. During this time, the pH level of the milk drops. The basic flavor profile of the cheese is already forming. Our product is still a liquid, so it's time to give it some texture. This step, called curdling, is where milk starts its transformation, and rennet is used here. The science behind it can get complex, but this reaction basically causes the milk to thicken and form solid lumps called curds. Plus, it leaves behind a liquid byproduct known as whey. Once the curd has formed, it's time to separate it from the whey. The curds and whey mixture is allowed to ferment and settle until the pH level drops to about 6.4. By this point, the curd has coalesced into a solid mass within the cheese-making vat. Now comes the cutting. Using long curd knives that reach all the way to the bottom of the vat, cheesemakers slice through the curd in a crisscross pattern. This step is crucial because cutting the curd increases its surface area, which allows for more separation from the whey. The size of the curds after cutting is a key factor in determining the final texture of the cheese. Larger chunks of curd tend to hold on to more moisture, resulting in a softer, moister cheese. But smaller curd pieces will lose more moisture. This will end up in a firmer, drier cheese. Once the curd has been cut, the next step is processing it more. This involves cooking and stirring the curds, or sometimes both. The goal here remains the same: to encourage the curds to continue releasing moisture, separating them even more from the whey. The more the curds are cooked and stirred, the drier the final cheese will be. Another technique used at this stage is washing the curd, which involves replacing the whey with water. This step impacts the cheese's flavor and texture, typically resulting in a more elastic cheese with a mild, pleasant taste. Washed curd cheeses like Gouda, Havarti, and Swedish Fontina are known for their smooth texture and subtle flavors. By now, the curds and whey have separated a lot, so it's time to remove the whey entirely. Draining the whey leaves behind only the solid curds. They can range in size depending on how finely they were cut. With the whey removed, the curds will start to resemble a thick mat. There are different methods to drain the whey. In some cases, cheesemakers let the whey drain off naturally, especially for softer cheeses. But when making harder cheeses that require less moisture, they often use a mold or press to compact the curds and squeeze out even more whey. For certain types of cheeses, there's an extra step to extract even more moisture, a process known as cheddaring. In this step, the curd mat is cut into sections. These sections are stacked on top of each other, and the weight from stacking presses out more whey. As the process goes on, the cheesemaker keeps cutting the slabs and restacking them, squeezing out even more whey each time. The longer this process lasts, the denser and crumblier the cheese becomes. Once the curd reaches the desired texture and acidity, the slabs are milled into smaller pieces. Now that the curd is taking on its final shape, it's time to enhance the flavor. Cheesemakers salt the cheese at this stage, and there's different ways to do it. For example, mozzarella often gets a brine bath, but drier cheeses are typically dry salted. Some cheeses are even flavored with spices and herbs. The possibilities for flavoring cheese are endless. This isn't as common though. Usually the goal is to let the natural flavors shine, with just salt bringing out that cheesy flavor. There aren't any more ingredients to add to the cheese at this point, so it's ready to be shaped. Even with so much moisture removed from the curd, it's still malleable and soft. So cheesemakers are able to press the curd into molds to create standardized shapes. Molds can be in basket or hoop form. Baskets are molds that are only open on one end, and hoops are bottomless molds, so they only wrap around the sides of the curd. In either case, the milled curd mixture is pressed into the mold and left there to solidify into the right shape. For many cheeses, the journey isn't over until they've aged. This process, also known as ripening, is what gives its final flavor, texture, and character. Cheese is aged in cool, humid conditions, allowing natural changes to harden the cheese and intensify its flavor. This can take anywhere from a few days to several years, and there are two main types of aging. Interior ripened cheeses are sealed with a rind, causing them to age from the inside out. Think cheddar or Swiss. Then there are surface ripened cheeses. These age from the outside in, developing a natural rind. Brie and Munster are good examples. Once aging is complete, the cheese is ready to be enjoyed. Well, there you have it. Whether it's in a mozzarella stick or the finest Swiss cheese, it all starts the same. To find out more about how your favorite foods are made, subscribe and check out the other videos on our channel. Until then, thanks for watching.